I don't think that talking food safety, you have to be a food scientist. I think everybody can understand the most basic concepts so that they can speak to the level that they feel most comfortable with. If the CEO feels most comfortable talking about washing hands or making sure that the sanitizer buckets are at the proper concentration, do that.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, VP of Marketing at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to another episode of Food Tech Talk, the podcast where we explore the latest innovations in food safety, technology, and compliance. Today, we're excited to welcome Jeremy Schneider. Jeremy is a seasoned food safety and quality assurance expert with over 15 years of experience in the industry. As the president and owner of Schneider Food Safety Services, he provides specialized consulting to enhance food safety programs. And previously, he held leadership roles at Salad & Go, Controllant, and Chipotle Mexican Grill, where he oversaw supplier quality, business development, and compliance initiatives. Jeremy holds a master's degree in food safety from Michigan State University and a bachelor's in culinary nutrition from Johnson & Wales University. His experience spans supply chain management, regulatory compliance, and risk mitigation, making him a trusted leader in the field. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today. I know we've had a chance to talk on several other occasions, but so glad you were able to come to the podcast. You have an extensive career, obviously, in food safety and technology. I'd love to know kind of what sparked your passion for this industry in the first place, and how did you really get to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you went through my bio and shared a little bit about what I've done over the years. Initially, I went to Johnson & Wales University to become a chef. I loved cooking, even from the earliest days in, different jobs I had, and decided I wanted to make a profession out of it. Went to school, and then I met my girlfriend, who became my wife, and I realized I didn't want to work till 3:00 in the morning every Saturday and Sunday. So I decided to go the nutrition route, and then ultimately fell in love with food science and food safety. So I kind of went that track, and I've had a really exciting career over the last 15, almost 20 years now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into all of that as well. But I know just recently you made a big career move to start your own consulting business. So I'd love to hear kind of how your career trajectory led you there and sort of what you're doing today.
I've always had the idea of wanting to own my own business. I've worked with consultants throughout the years, and I've always found that they bring a new series of ideas and concepts and ways of thinking that I always wanted to bring that to my clients. I've got a lot of entrepreneurs in my family. I've been surrounded by them throughout my life. And I knew that was something I wanted to do, and the opportunity presented itself. So I decided to take that.
That is awesome. I'm sure that your clients appreciate all of your expertise. So for our main interview questions, you and I had talked about, kind of going back to the basics in food safety. And this is something that I've noticed with a lot of interviews I've had is like, there is that base level food safety that sometimes gets lost when we talk about a lot of the new and upcoming trends. So let's get down to the fundamentals. With the technology and evolving regulations, what are the foundational pieces of food safety principles that you really feel like every company needs to focus on and master to be successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just as you said, we are excited about all the new and exciting technologies that are out there, but the fundamentals have served us well for many, many years. But this is still an area that we are lacking in, so things like food safety plans, right? And HACCP programs. These are processes, I don't have to go into the history of where they started from NASA and so on and so forth, but these were developed, and they're processes that are tried and true and continue to provide food safety to food manufacturers, to QSR restaurants, and then all of the prerequisite programs that come along with that. So sanitation programs, pest control programs, and then all the supporting documents and programs that come around with that. And then even simply things like hand washing and excluding ill employees If we did some of these things at the highest level possible, simply hand washing, we'd have much safer food globally. We just don't do a good job at that. So if we really focused on some of those standards and processes, we'd be much farther along.
Yeah. And I mean, when you see a company that's struggling maybe with some of these basics, how do you get them back on the right track?
So I work with like a lot of clients and I look at a lot of very beautiful documented programs, right? It's not a program issue. It's usually an implementation issue. It's moving from the idea of the concept, the document, to the reality. And that's where we lose things. So first and foremost, we look at programs. We see what the programs look like. Are they in place? Generally so. But then when we go to the plant floor, we go to the back of the house at the restaurant, then we realize that what is in the documents are the things that we're not actually doing. So we need to figure out how to bridge that gap between the things we say and then the things we actually do. And that's where we lose a lot of it.
I completely agree. And I think this kind of leads us to our next topic, which is really about food safety culture. Because if you have a lot of these very ingrained things that people know that they need to do, it's got to be part of the culture. So, how do you recommend that businesses really create that culture of food safety and compliance? And what strategies could they implement to make it just part of what they do?
Absolutely. I think that there's been a significant focus on food safety culture over the last many years. And I wholeheartedly agree. I believe that it is fundamental to moving food safety forward. But food safety culture needs to be part of the holistic culture. I don't think we want to necessarily separate it as something unique or special, but it needs to be ingrained into our company's culture, into everything that we do. And everything needs to be part of that. And every person within the organization needs to be bought into that, from the CEO to the sweeper on the plant floor. And so I think that we talk about this a lot, but we try to separate it. And we've done this, in other parts of our organizations too, like just simply safety, right? Making sure we do things safely. And we do the same thing with food safety. But often it becomes relegated to the department or a siloed individual who is responsible for food safety. And I think it's something that we need to move beyond the general concept in that way. And it needs to be something that's ingrained into everything that we do. I still see companies talking about like food safety as a dirty word. Like there's a superstition around it. If you say you got to knock on wood, it's like, don't say Beetlejuice, there's something that's going to happen. But the reality is that we need to talk about it all of the time. And we don't hear about like the CEO talking about food safety very often, unless it's in a situation where they're apologizing for some sort of misdoing or something that failed. What I want to see more is conversations around food safety at the highest level, internally and externally. I think it's totally fine to be able to talk about the work that's being done, improvements that are being made every day. And even on like earning calls, if you brought up that we invested in this new system or this new technology, or we doubled down on implementing food safety plan within our stores, I don't think that's a bad thing to say, but I think people are nervous and scared about it. So I think we need to talk about it more. And it should be something that's talked about at every meeting, right? If it's a marketing meeting, let's touch on food safety for a moment. If we're talking about operations, let's make sure we're touching on food safety. Let's make sure we're bringing these up so that it becomes ingrained and embedded in everything that we do, so that when something happens or if there's a challenge, we're not too scared of it, right? And we're not too scared that something is going to be, something's going to happen that we were not expecting. So let's prepare for it and let's talk about it more and have those open conversations.
Looking to improve your supply chain? At Trustwell, we've been connecting the dots between the food industry and data for over 40 years to give you more control and visibility across the full supply chain. Our comprehensive food logic platform and our new Genesis Foods set a new standard for compliance, transparency, and quality across the food industry. Request a demo today. The link is in the show notes, or visit us at trustwell.com. Yeah, I love that approach. And I've heard people say also that it's almost like food safety is kind of like this hidden part of being in this industry where it's like we're doing it, we're not talking about it. So like I love the idea of like, yeah, let's talk about it. And when you said going from the sweeper to the C-suite, I think that really resonates with a lot of companies today. Do you feel like the way that someone in a different role within the organization is talking about food safety or experiencing food safety is different? And like, how do you kind of break through those barriers depending on who you're talking to within the organization?
Yeah, I don't think that talking food safety, you have to be a food scientist. I think everybody can understand the most basic concepts so that they can speak to the level that they feel most comfortable with. If the CEO feels most comfortable talking about washing hands or making sure that the sanitizer buckets are at the proper concentration, do that. And if you feel comfortable talking at a deeper level or talking about other things, that's fine too. I'd say own it where you feel the most comfortable and being able to have it as your flag, right? Raise your flag and being able to talk about those things continuously, right? And I'm a big believer in employee health being like one of the most critical things that we can do from a food safety perspective. Excluding ill employees, I talk about that all of the time. Everybody I talk to about it, and they're like, it has a direct impact on food safety, right? And that's the thing that I own. That doesn't mean that I negate the other things that are important, but own your piece and just be a champion for those. And when we're scared of it or we're nervous, let's make sure we learn. Let's make sure we gain knowledge so that we can speak intelligently about those things that are really important for our business.
Yeah, and I think that sick employees is a great example of how you can merge your company culture kind of with the food safety culture. Because if your company culture is like come to work sick and overwork and all of those types of feelings, like that people will follow that rather than following like the food safety part of the culture. And so that's a great example of one where, hey, this comes together. It's about our whole company culture.
Exactly. That's a great point, right? Like I remember before COVID when it was like pretty common that somebody would come to work pretty sick, right? They'd maybe have a fever or something else. Like I think those days are gone. But even when we talk about like paying for people's sick leave, if your organization doesn't have like a sick leave policy, you're pretty much like promoting people going to work sick, right? Because we know that, especially, at the minimum wage level and at that range, if you miss a couple days of work, that might mean you're not paying your gas bill. And so people are willing to take risks that are not best for your business, but because you haven't thought through some of the food safety implications with the alternative. So it does go right to your holistic company culture. What are the things you believe in?
And I'd love to kind of talk about the state of food safety today. So, what do you feel like are really the biggest challenges that you're seeing out there that the industry is facing right now regarding food safety? And how would you approach those?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of challenges facing our industry right now. When it comes to labor continues to be a challenge. I've talked to pretty much every client that I work with is having labor challenges either on the plant floor or even in the QA lab. Hiring and retaining employees, that's a huge one. And then just the other effects that are on our business right now, food costs are really tough to manage. Same store sales, we're seeing some drops in that in different areas. Inflation and then like issues with trade war. These are all business related impacts, but they also have food safety implications too, right? So we know food fraud is definitely a concern when it comes to specific issues related to high value ingredients, right? We've got concerns right now related to the idea of using tallow as an oil for fries. And this is real big news with Kennedy. And there's not a massive amount of tallow out there for everybody to use, right? So those types of concerns raise risks to food fraud. General food safety things continue to be the big challenges, right? Environmental type contamination, and then whole genome sequencing. I still think that most of the industry is still behind on using this technology in a way that is really relevant and beneficial for them. We see the regulators using it and they're tying together long-term foodborne illness situations, just recently one with the milk product. So the technology's out there. We've got to leverage it, though. We got to be able to use it to our own benefit. So there's a lot of tailwinds for food safety and opportunities, but there's also a lot of challenges for our industry in general as well right now.
Totally agree. And those are great examples. And I mean, you brought up the regulations, and I know, what's on a lot of people's minds right now is FSMA 204 and, the need for increased traceability. What impact do you think that is having today and the impact that it's going to have in the future?
I think that anytime we're focusing on traceability and we do work to improve it, it's beneficial. There's tons of questions out there about FSMA 204. There's a lot of miscommunication, misunderstandings, and confusion in general about what's required and what's not. And I think that being experts in the field and trying to demystify this program, I think it helps the whole industry by being able to bring real data, go back to what the regulation says, and be able to clarify some of those. It would at least solve some of those challenges. But it is big. It's a big program. It's going to take time and investment. I actually recently had a conversation with another colleague in the industry, and they said, "What are people thinking about FSMA 204?" I said, "Well, last year people were like, oh no, I got to get going now. I got to get on it, right?" And now it's middle of March. And I said, now people are like, okay, I've got to work on getting to compliance. I'm probably not going to hit January 2026. It's too soon, but I still need to work against trying to get to compliance. And I think that's what's most important, is that we think about continuously focusing on achieving compliance and then working towards that. Even if you may not hit 100% of your items that are on the FTL list being, meeting compliance by January. But if you start now and we're working on it, I think that's what's most important. It is a big challenge, and every organization has to tackle it in a different way that works for them.
Absolutely. And I think we've definitely heard the same, that a year ago, there's still a lot of people that were going, we haven't gotten started. We really need to get going. And now it's just going to continuously get closer and closer. So yeah, anything that you can do, it's like a bit of it is better than nothing, right? So getting going now is really important. And I wanted to talk about something that we kind of started with. You mentioned HACCP, and we know it's the foundation for food safety. We know it's one of those getting back to the basics. But I feel like, the implementation can be varied based on organization, and there's folks that maybe are doing it differently. So, what do you think is most important for companies to know and to do when trying to implement HACCP?
The biggest opportunity just around this is understanding what your program is. Does it actually meet what you are doing? And then is it fully implemented within your organization? So if it's the manufacturing line, does it match what you're actually doing? Does it match the equipment that you have in line? Have you implemented it within your store? Does it actually follow your standards that you're doing right now? It should be a living document. It should be a program that you're continuously working on and improving, but it also should mirror what you're actually doing. It's not just something that goes into a file or into a binder and you pull it out when the audit comes. It's something that you need to basically mirror what you're actually doing with the documents. And everybody within their organization needs to understand what HACCP is and what it means and what you need to do about it, right? And so too often, I think I touched on this a little while ago, QA owns HACCP plan. Okay. Everybody needs to know what it is. Everybody needs to be trained on it, and everybody needs to be able to speak intelligently about what the program is and how they play their part within that. Maybe they're the machine operator. Maybe they're the person who checks the metal detector or the X-ray or ensures the water activity or whatever their job is, but how it plays a critical role as part of the HACCP program. So that's the biggest thing. It's not that we don't have the documents or we have the programs. We all have those by and large. It's the implementation and doing what you say you're doing. That's the biggest miss. And if we, and I just talk about the holistic food safety industry, if we spend more time on the education piece, then we would be much farther along than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, speaking of misses, and that's one of them, what other mistakes or misses do you see happening out there? And how can companies address them and kind of mitigate their risk of creating those same common mistakes?
That's a great question. I think that when we simplify process so that people, if it's your line level employees, where it's easier for them to do the right thing than it is for them to do the wrong thing, we're more likely to do the right thing. People want to, but we all have this limited amount of time to do things. And when things are complicated, people will find ways to cut corners. It's just the nature of human reality, is that they will find a way to do it easier because it is easier. So if we build our programs in ways that it is easier to do the right thing, then they'll do that. And that's not just writing a program and sending it out there. It's the physical process of watching the people who do the work to see if it's actually easier, to see if it's actually more simple for them to do that, and then adjust and modify. And then coming back to some of the things like sanitation processes, right? Are we doing them the right way? Do we believe that we're the experts to be able to do everything the right way? Or have we being able to utilize our relationships with our suppliers to understand the best way to do something? And then being able to take that information from those experts and being able to communicate that to the people doing the job. We miss that sometimes. I think sometimes we think that we're the experts of everything when we have a massive amount of resources around us to be able to do this. 99.99% of things have been done before. We just have to work with the resources that we have to be able to do them to the best way possible, right? And don't feel like we have to reinvent the wheel every time. Pest control, perfect example, right? There's all sorts of cool gadgetry now that are available, right? That see if you have a rodent in your trap, right? And all these things. Sometimes the most basic things that we do will work. And we don't have to complicate things because the tried and true things generally continue to work really, really well. So finding ways to do things the right way is critical. And then making sure that we're actually working with our teams to make sure that they are actually doing it. That's what's most important, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I think all of that lends itself to what we've talked about with culture and process and all of that. So, yeah, I appreciate that. And I do want to kind of also switch gears a little bit and talk about technology. Even with all of these foundational things that, we're seeing a huge transformation in the industry right now. We're seeing, advances in technology and all of that. And so, what innovations are you seeing right now that you feel like are making the biggest impact and that will have the largest impact in the future?
We should definitely leverage technology, right? I'm a big believer in technology way back. I really believe that the technology has the ability to make our jobs easier so that we can be more efficient. And a few areas that are really standing out that I think will have a big impact over the next year or coming years is going to be AI. We're all talking about AI. How do we leverage AI to make our lives easier? There was like a meme that was out there that said, I want AI to wash my dishes and do my laundry while I do the art and writing. It's actually the other way around right now. So being able to utilize AI to make our lives easier, do those cumbersome, low value but important jobs, super important. And that allows us to be able to do the things that we enjoy to do and that we're better at. It's going to be critical. There's lots of other really cool technologies right now. I'm super excited about the next era of RFID technology. A lot of us come with baggage from the 10, 15 years ago, the Walmart challenges and things like that. So I'm super excited to see what that has to provide us because I believe that it does. Nanotechnology around ozone and water for sanitation for systems, I think is really, really cool technology too. IoT is already providing all sorts of great value if it's temperature monitoring or other sensor technology to automate some of those really important tasks like making sure hot foods are hot and cold foods are cold, back to the fundamentals, right? It's augmenting the things we should be doing and removing some of those basic rudimentary tasks that get pencil whipped. I think those are all really cool things. And if we can understand how we can leverage technology to make our lives easier and to provide, those high level food safety challenges and be able to solve some of those with technology, I think it's a win-win for sure.
Completely agree. And we know each other from Trustwell software, actually. And in your past at Salad and Go and Chipotle, you've used FoodLogic, Genesis Foods. Tell me about your experience with that and how do you feel like supply chain software can really make a difference for a lot of businesses?
My history with the organization goes back to somewhere around 2010 or 11, right? I think that the organization was pretty close to a garage shop at that point, and it was just starting, right? It was all about traceability, and as the system continued to grow with some of the other modules that have come out, the food quality reporting and these other pieces, right? It just continues to add value for the clients. Like one of the biggest tools we have for assuring food safety within our supply chain is approved supplier programs. And being able to leverage technology to implement these programs in a way that's not cumbersome, but also provides the value we need is really important. And nutrition is something that I feel will gain more and more traction as a focus over the next couple of years as we're seeing changes. So being able to feel really confident about the information you're providing is super critical. And it's really neat to see the evolution of the technology over the last many years. So it's been fun.
I think seeing the coming together of supplier management and traceability within FoodLogic has been just really exciting, based on kind of what's going on with FSMA 204. And we hope that it's helping a lot of folks in the industry. So, to close this out here, you've had years of experience, obviously. Share with me maybe some aha moments that you've had in the past when it comes to food safety and your leadership in those areas.
I think one thing that is really important that sometimes we talk about it, but it never really gets a lot of traction. But I think it's really important to emphasize is that food safety leaders need to be business leaders within their organization. I realized very early on in my career that if I wanted to be successful beyond FSQA team, that I needed to really understand business. So I needed to understand what the purchasing team did. I needed to understand what supply chain and finance and marketing and operations and all these other teams, what they did so that I could become an indispensable benefit to those departments. And so that I could speak the language that they understand better than the language that I'm mostly accustomed to speaking. Because those of us who are scientists understand and can talk to each other. But when we're trying to convey things that are important to other people who don't understand our language, things get lost. And so understanding how other organizations within a company operate can be really helpful for your personal growth as a professional. And then being able to convey what you need. So, I think that there's a conversation that always happens about the cost of food safety and that being part of, it's a cost line. Generally speaking, it's because we don't know how to communicate very well with the people who we're trying to sell the operation or the option or whatever we're looking for to them. We need to be able to understand what the impacts of our business are, the things that are happening outside of our area. Everybody has their hand out. Every department needs money, right? And you just have to be able to communicate in a way that shows the value. And if you can save money, you should definitely make the business conversation about that, right? Because you don't just want another system, another technology. You need to show how it's going to make your life easier, how it's going to make the organization's life better, and how you're going to save money or you're going to improve whatever it is that you're doing with that system. Then you have an opportunity to be able to get the money you need to invest in whatever you're trying to do.
Yes, totally agree. Because I think as a food safety professional, you have to think about it in terms of the wider business. And I see a lot where there's this strong passion in this industry for food safety, which I love. But at the same time, you have to be able to speak that language of, your CFO and your CEO and your board and all of those things. So I think that's definitely great advice for our audience. So just kind of looking ahead, we talked about AI, we talked about some trends. One of the things that I keep seeing come up a lot is consumer expectations and consumer-led traceability. And, even just with all of the changes regulatory going on right now, we're looking at additives and what's in our food. So what do you see as some of those future trends that you're looking out for in the next 5 years?
I think that we're living in a very transformative time right now. I think that we're going to see a lot of change in the next year to 3 years. And I think that what's probably best is be prepared for those changes and to be willing and ready to adapt to those adjustments. I think that we'll see a lot more focus on some of these chemical concerns. Perhaps it's colors or artificial flavors or these other perhaps peripheral from a food safety perspective to the things we're focused on. But you'll have to, as an organization, be ready to adapt and do what you need to do to adjust your strategy. So for instance, if you find that an ingredient that you previously used is now banned, how are you going to adjust and modify that recipe? And perhaps you should think now about doing those different types of things before you hear the knock on the door to do it. So get ahead of some of those different things, but also remember the critical food safety things, right? Is making sure that, we keep hot foods hot, cold foods cold. We're following our HACCP programs, whatever our critical control points are that we're tracking against those, because those are going to continue to deliver the expectation that we want them to. But we know that generally speaking, the additives and food colors and these types of things are a lot more relatable from a PR perspective. Parents, moms understand these things a little bit more, or at least are willing to talk about them. So I think we'll see a lot more focus on those, especially over the next several years. But using technology in your area and where it makes sense is certainly going to be important.
Totally agree. So this is just kind of a fun question I like to ask sometimes of guests. Who within the industry would you love to take to lunch and have a conversation with?
I'm going to go back to somebody that I used to work with, James Marsden. Dr. Marsden. He's a long-time person in our industry, extremely smart. I had the opportunity to work for him for a couple of years. I'd love to take him out to lunch again and just kind of catch up and see how things are going and get his insights and vision on different things. I've had the opportunity to meet with many of the top individuals in our industry and try to stay in touch with some of those people as well. So the good thing about LinkedIn is it's easy to reach out to people, even if they feel like they're far away. So
Yeah, I love that. I think sometimes I wish that I could reach out to old colleagues as well. And it's, having that history, nothing better than that. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining us. This has been just awesome to get your perspective and given your expertise. It's been great to chat today.
thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Trustwell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.